They needed a severed head. So I had to fly to Michigan, I had to cast up Patrick's head, then I had to fly back here, and I took the stone head that I casted him. It was a lot easier to get in and out of the airports. But I took the stone head and I carried it on in a duffel bag wrapped up in bubble wrap because I did not want to chance it going through regular baggage. So what ended up happening was it had to go through the scanner, and you should have seen the look on the TSA person's face that was scanning it. First they looked at it, then they looked at it again, then they looked up at me, and I said, you know, it's like that movie. And they said, yeah, 7 heads in a duffel bag. And I said, yeah, but I wasn't greedy, I only needed 1. So I got it back here, and then I had to re-sculpt his eyes open and make the whole fake head for him, sculpt his mouth open, and then make fangs for it and teeth. And when I took it back with me again, I went through the whole process of going through TSA. This time, of course, they had to open and unwrap the whole thing because they could see color. So they were like, this is a little scary, but I said, this is what I do for a living, and I said, I have to carry it with me because I said, that's a $1,700 head, and I can't let it out of my sight. I was already taking classes in theater, and I had to also take acting classes, and I had to act in shows, had to do all the things everybody else was doing. I had to take script analysis and set design and costume design. I tried set design, I couldn't stand it. At the time you didn't have a computer, so you weren't doing it all on a computer in 3D. You had to actually build these little sets with little chairs and tables, and I was like, I can't stand this. I don't want to do this. I tried lighting design. Loved doing the design work, hated climbing up in the rafters and hanging the lights. That made me too nervous. Little leery of heights. And then costume design, loved again design process because it's solitary. And you can sit there and design and draw, and then somebody else implements it. But when I had to sit at a sewing machine for hours and hours and hours in the costume shop, I went, this is not for me. Rick Rice was the instructor at the time. He also taught the makeup classes along with the costume classes and designed the costumes for the shows. And Rick Rice said, why don't you take a makeup class? And I was 19 at the time. And I said, okay, I will try a makeup class. And after the first class, I was hooked. I was immediately hooked. I went, wow, I can have gratification in 15 minutes to 2 to 3 hours. And so I took every makeup class that they offered. And he said, we're out of makeup courses for you, Robert. How would you like to assist me the next semester? You can assist the class. And I said, I'm there. I started the process of studying a little bit more from Richard Corson's book, Stage Makeup. That book was definitive. Richard Corson's book was the beginning of a lifelong journey of studying makeup. And when I left there, I took a brief respite from school, and I actually went down south to Birmingham, Alabama. Now, why I went to Birmingham, Alabama is because I had a friend that lived there and I wanted to get away from the cold, the snow, and Michigan isn't exactly the greatest place to be in the middle of winter. So I was done with all of that. I was done slipping on my ass and going uphill both ways to school, and my books going all over the place. So I moved south to Birmingham, Alabama, and while I was there, I did a little acting. I did a little modeling because I was still young and handsome, and people wanted me to be in their commercials. But I also fell in line with a company and a gentleman by the name of Jim Ostrowski, which was, he did a lot of beauty makeup and fashion. So I started working in a beauty salon in a very posh neighborhood, and I would help these older ladies learn how to do their makeup. And then in the evenings, I would go and I would do theatrical makeup around town, around the area called 5 Points South, where they had little theaters. And then on my days off, I worked in a restaurant called Claude Austin's and was waiting tables, so I was a busy young man. And then I found a dance company called Birmingham Dance Theater, and Joni Nash and her mother Nora Nash taught classes, and they found out I could do makeup. And they said, we will give you your dance classes for free if you will do our makeup for our recitals and things of that nature. So for 2 years, I got free dance classes. I taught beginning theater to little kids about 5 to 11 years old, and took my dance classes, and the recitals I did the makeup on just about everybody. I was continuously figuring out more and more about makeup, and then I did runway and fashion, and I finally decided, I went, okay, I'm done with this, and I hate leaving, but I think now is the time I have to start focusing on getting into school, go back to school, get my graduate degree. I was in my early 20s, and I was already very aware that if I didn't do it now, I might never do it. I looked through several schools, one in San Francisco, which had a great program and it was attached to the opera, but I didn't want to do opera makeup, I wanted to do film and television. And then I looked at I think it was NYU, and I didn't want to go back to the cold. So I said, I don't think I want to go to New York, and New York's so big, I'm a little concerned about that being a small town boy. I'll get lost there. So I said, if I'm going to starve and be back in school, I want to get a tan at the same time. So off to Los Angeles I go, and the closest I decided to get was Cal State Long Beach. And they had a wonderful program, and unbeknownst to me, Bill Smith was the instructor there, and he was a protege of Richard Corson's. And I studied Richard's book at Western Michigan University. So I went, this is the perfect fit. This is where I need to be. I want a master's in makeup. If I have to take some costume design classes too, because they're interrelated, I said, I'll take them. Whatever it is that I have to take, I'll do. So I signed up, I was approved, and I got into Cal State Long Beach in the graduate program. Off I went with $600 to my name in a beat-up old 1986 Skylark. And that's all. I gave away everything I had. I sold what I could. And I actually had to buy 2 tires on the way because my tires were so old on the car that they were balding by the time I got to about Nashville, Tennessee. I looked at the tires and went, they're not going to make it all the way through that hot desert. Bill Smith told me, he said, you need to learn whatever you can because you never know what it is that's going to actually propel you further into your career. And everyone in my class, in the makeup class, was right-handed except me. And he was right-handed, Bill Smith was. So when he began to teach me how to ventilate or not, I couldn't get it. Because he was teaching me right-handed and I'm left-handed, and I was so frustrated I thought, I will never get this process. One day he had an epiphany, and he said, don't look at my hands, look in the mirror. So I watched his hands in the mirror and it reversed everything for me. And I got it. It was like a light went on in my head and I went, I got it, I got it, I got it. And so I went home that night and I struggled through it, but I made my first mustache. And then we had to do a fronted wig, and I learned how to front wigs. And then after that, we learned how to make a full wig and full beards. And so that was the beginning of me learning how to ventilate or not hair. We had to take sculpting classes for 3-dimensional makeup so that you learn how to do prosthetic appliances. We learned how to cast people's faces and make the molds and then do the sculptures. And that set me on the path to, when I graduated from there in '88, knocking on doors. This is still before we had all the technology we have today where you can look up special makeup effects shops online. I had to go through magazines like Fangoria and a couple others, Gore Zone or something like that, and try and find these makeup shops' names and try and find their phone numbers and see if I could call them and go in and interview. I was still young and I was scared. I was like, I have no idea where I'm going or how I'm going to get there, but I just know what I want. And I think that's what you have to do first. You have to know what you want, you have to have the direction, and you don't really have to ask how, you just have to ask yourself, why is it that you want that? What does it do in the way of fulfilling you and fulfilling your purpose? Stan Winston Studios is where I ended up first, and then I heard that another place was gearing up for Child's Play 3, and I was working on Terminator 2 at the time. I was only an apprentice, I wasn't even getting paid. But they were treating me well, but I was making these little puff-out foam pieces that were for the Mercury Man, they called him, the character where you could shoot him and it would just look like splashes came out of his chest or his body. And I heard that Kevin Yeager was hiring for Child's Play 3. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to go over there. And somebody told me how to get there and the phone number. I made a phone call, I went in, and I met with a man named Ron Pipes, who is still a friend of mine today. And I interviewed with him, and he needed somebody to ventilate. So he said, go home, make a mustache for me, bring it back tomorrow, and let me see your work. So that's what I did. I went home that night, made a mustache, came back, and he said, how does $425 a week sound to you? And I was like, $425 a week? To me, that was a lot of money back then, because this was like 1989. And I said, yeah, I'll take it. So I ended up making about 23 of those, 23 or 24 of those crazy Chucky wigs.